on top of your, if you're getting a new car and you do have this car payment on top of that, you're probably going to be required to get an elevated level of insurance coverage as well. So your car insurance
Yes.
payment is going to be way up there as well. So it adds up super fast. Hey everyone, welcome to the Remote Investor. I'm Pierre Carrillo, and today I'm joined by my co-host,
Michael Albaum.
and we have a fun topic for you all today. We want to talk about starting to think about real estate investing when you're very young, before you have the money to do it. But before we hop in, Mike, how are you doing?
I'm
How's it going?
good,
What's going on
man.
in your world?
Well, I'm in my van today, recording from my mobile office slash house. We're at our house that's under construction. Things are crazy. We just came to check in on things, and the house we're renting, PG&E cut power from 8 to 3 this afternoon. So we're like, okay, guess we're gonna go somewhere else. So we brought the dogs over to the house, check up on things, and progress is slow, but it's moving. It's moving. How about you, man? What's going on?
Busy as ever, man. But I got my new office set up here, so you notice a
Looks
little difference in
good.
background.
Looks
Yeah, it's
really good.
been working on that over the last couple of weeks. Got a clean place to work finally. I was just exploding all my gear onto the floor every time I got in from work. So now I finally have a perfect location for every piece of gear with a charging station and a
Nice.
whiteboard. And I feel like I'm a lot more efficient and effective with my work when I'm in a clean space. So this is a game changer for me.
It makes a big difference when I'm in those dirty spaces and cluttered spaces. I'm like, no, it's fine. It doesn't make a difference because I don't want to clean it up. And then when I clean it up, I'm like, oh, it does make a difference.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, my productive hours increase in a clean room.
Nice, man. Love it.
Cool. Well, without further ado, let's jump into this topic. Um, I know real estate investing, it's a high barrier to entry. It seems when you're starting out that it's inaccessible and that for young people, it's just completely out of the question. And with interest rates these days and the price of houses these days, it just seems
In
like
this economy,
how does anyone buy a house, let alone buy a second one to invest in, or like what the heck? So let's go and give some let's give our youthful audience some tips on how to get started.
totally. Well, I mean, first to something you just said is like, how do people buy a first house and then a second house to invest in? I would almost say think about flipping that. And that's what I did for the better part of a decade is I was investing in rental properties before I ever owned the house that I lived in. And so if you can even just approach investing with that mindset and think, okay, I'm going to go build a cash flowing portfolio first and then let that pay for my lifestyle, that often becomes an easier or has a lower barrier to entry, of course, depending on where you live, as opposed to saying, I want to go buy a primary, I want to go figure out where I'm going to live, and then anything left over or then down the road, I can go invest in. So just even as you're thinking about housing in general, I would encourage anyone listening to think about that as a strategy.
Yeah, good point. Especially for the age group that we're speaking to in this episode, 18 to 25, really. This is the time to go in and do those things like house hacking. You don't need your private house with a family just yet. This is the time to make sacrifices, to live a little bit uncomfortably and get ahead. So totally, very good point.
Yep. No, I love that.
All right, so to kick it off, what are some of the things that beginner investors or people that aspire to invest can do to start their financial snowball?
So it's a super good question. Something that I did, and I'll, speak to my personal experiences, is when I first came out of college, I had an engineering degree and I was like, awesome, I'm set up. I was stoked. I was moving up to the North Bay area, California, expensive market. Therefore, my starting salary was like $70,000. And coming out of school, that was one of the strongest salaries of any of my buddies. And I was like, nice, crushed it. I did the school thing. Now I'm getting the job thing and I'm set. And then I very quickly realized that my take home paycheck wasn't going to be enough to cover A, my lifestyle, or B, to really get me ahead. And so what I quickly started to do is I moved in with a roommate. I moved out of the one bedroom apartment that I was living in and moved in with a roommate. But some other things that I started to recognize was that the company I was working for, they didn't pay me the top salary that I could get for this line of work. But what they did do is they paid for my cell phone, they paid for my internet, they paid for all my travel, and I was traveling all the time. They paid for my car. I had the regular health benefits, health, medical, life insurance, all that kind of stuff. They paid a significant portion of that. But those kind of top three things, the car, the cell phone, the internet, I think cumulatively, if most people's car payment, car, gas, insurance, let's lump all that together, I don't know, $500 a month, let's say, plus the cell phone, $100 a month, internet, another $100 a month. So like $700 a month is what I was getting, and by taking a lesser salary than I could have. And so in order to make that equivalent in take home dollars, I would have had to probably go earn $1,000 or $1,100 a month, which is 12 grand a year. And so in thinking about jobs and how you set yourself up for success and how to save for as much as you possibly can to then ultimately go invest, it's not always the highest salary that's going to get you there fastest. Because if I were to go take a job that made me $10,000 more, right, in salary, my take home would be more than it was. But at the end of the day, after I paid all my expenses, I would end up with less in my pocket. And so I was really strategic around staying in this particular job longer than I could have or needed to, because it was a lifestyle job that allowed me to travel, that helped me to travel. And I had so much free time, I was able to invest. I had a lot of free time to invest. So it was really a win-win-win. And so I think I would encourage anybody listening in thinking about how to get started investing, look at the jobs that are available to you and go look at the ones that are going to maximize your goal benefits or maximize the things that are actually going to help you get to where you want to go fastest. And it's not always obvious. Like I said, it's not always the biggest salary number is going to get you there fastest, which was totally counterintuitive to me.
What sort of jobs lend well to that?
Man, it's a good question. Like, I think a lot of sales jobs can be really great. A lot of them do travel, and so therefore you're not at home spending money, and so anytime you're on the road, your expenses are covered. Engineering jobs. I was a fire protection engineer working in the insurance industry. That's a huge one. Basically, any fire protection engineer in the insurance industry is going to be doing what I was doing, and any kind of job that requires you to travel is likely going to pay for some of your living expenses, possibly your car, cell phone, that sort of thing. And so again, these jobs are really great if you have the ability to do them, right? If you have the ability to travel, if you're open to traveling. Some people listening is like, nah, I have a family, 4 kids, like there's no way I'm traveling. So that might not be for you, but so look to a job that maximizes some of the other benefits. The tech industry as a whole is known for being really generous with their medical benefits, paying oftentimes 100% of your medical premiums and then 60% or 65% of your spouse's, right? So looking at some of these benefits, I think, is a great way to figure out how do you maximize your take-home dollars, or how do you maximize what you're able to save on a monthly basis.
Yeah, good point. Travel jobs. I used to have a job that required me to travel, and one of the things that I got from it was per diem for,
Yeah.
so, and they would give you more per diem than you actually need to eat. So I would go and get a sandwich at a deli and just pocket the rest of the per diem. Unfortunately, I didn't know my good buddy Mike back then, and I was not wise, and I spent all the extra money. But yeah, good point.
Yeah, dude,
Okay.
you nailed it, man. Like, I never got per diem, which I always was frustrated by. We just got a credit card and they were like, don't go crazy. And so I was able to eat at some really cool and fun restaurants that if I were paying for it, I wouldn't go eat at. But the per diem thing, any job you get per diem, you can make a huge gain in your savings rate just by being really smart and responsible about how you spend those dollars.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point with the credit card there. Use your credit card and then pay it off. Start building up your credit line as early as you can.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So now that we have an influx of savings because of our wise job choice, how do we maximize the impact of those dollars?
Yeah, it's another great question. Personally, again, my personal experience is I would use a high yield savings account. And today, when we're recording this, I mean, you can go get free accounts that are at 5%. You can get access to accounts that are at 5% savings rate totally for free. So just parking your money there. And I think, and we'll get into this maybe a little bit later, but like, I worry that some people go invest their savings, and then those savings are at risk of principal loss or principal reduction. And so you think about, okay, where do I park this money that I've saved that I plan on using for a future investment? Where do I park it so that I have access to it when I'm ready to make that investment. For those listeners that are wanting to invest in the stock market, well, you can just go ahead and throw those dollars into the stock market immediately because that's the end goal of the investment. For others, I want to invest in real estate that are trying to accumulate a lump sum of money to use as a down payment. I'm not sure sticking in the stock market makes sense because we've seen stock market crashes. Today it's fine, tomorrow it's not. And so if you went and put $1,000 in the stock market and it takes a 20% dip and you need that money 6 months, a year down the road, and the stock market doesn't recover in time, that feels riskier to me. And so I'm kind of, it's funny, I'm risk averse in a lot of senses of the word. I've done some really crazy and dumb stuff, which might lead you to think that I'm not risk averse, but I think at the end of the day, I kind of am. So while you're collecting and building your, we'll call it a nest egg or your investment egg, I like it in cash, just personally. That's me. And so you can maximize the impact that that cash growth potential has by using a high yield savings account.
And do you use any target date funds in that as well? Like a
So target,
CD or yeah,
like a CD.
yeah, because you can
You
lock it
know,
up for, say a set amount of time and you're guaranteed this investment. And they're typically a little bit higher than your high yield savings.
yeah, they are. No, you know what? I don't, but I have used like 3 month T bills, like government
Okay.
bonds,
The treasury.
uh, exactly the treasury bills, because they were paying like times 6 or 7%. And I'm like, yeah, I know I'm not gonna need this money for 3 months. But again, that's something you have to have a set amount for, or a chunk of money to stick into that vehicle, as opposed to just when you're saving into a high yield savings account, you're continually adding to that. CDs, same thing. Like if you just have to know when you're likely going to need the money is the important thing. And so giving yourself more runway, I think, than less is a great way to go. And so if you're thinking you might need the money in a year, take a 9 month CD, 6 month CD, right? You're not maximizing every single dollar. You're not squeezing out every single return percentage, but you're also giving yourself that flexibility to have access to the money, which at the end of the day, I think is more important and is probably more impactful than that extra 1/4% return you're going to earn on your money for leaving it a little bit longer.
Cool. Now, beyond just income, what are some other things you can do as far as lifestyle to maximize your savings rate?
Yeah, it's another great question. Live with people like roommates. That's so often the easiest and I think often most overlooked solution to reducing housing expenses. And I think people have all kinds of reasons why living with roommates doesn't make sense or won't work for them or isn't feasible. And I'm like, yeah, okay, but it's like the easiest thing to do or the most impactful thing to do to change your housing cost. And so me, I had just come out of college. I got that first job. I was super excited to live by myself. I was like, I'm earning money. And then very quickly realized like, could I afford it? Yes. Did it make sense for me based on what I was trying to do, which was invest in real estate? No. And so I made a change almost immediately. And I lived with roommates for 10 years, all the while after I had graduated college and I was investing in rental real estate and trying to save for that next deal. I had roommates when I was engaged. I had roommates after I got married because it just made financial sense for us. We knew it was a means to an end. It wasn't our first choice, but we sacrificed because we knew we were trying to get somewhere. And so I am just a huge fan, a huge advocate of living with roommates. Is it fun? Not always, but it can be. Like if you choose good roommates and have a cool place to live, like it can totally be fun. It doesn't have to be this sacrificial thing. It can be a net positive. But that's one of the biggest things I think people can do. Again, that's often overlooked. Another thing to consider is maybe living with your parents, if that's an option for you. A lot of people I know after college moved back in with their parents. Their parents weren't charging them rent. They saved a ton of money. So roommates slash parents, right? Those are two good ones. Just live with more people.
But help your parents out now if they're paying all the bills. Help them
Yeah,
out. Clean
totally.
up the house.
Throw them a couple buckaroos. Show them you're serious. Yeah, no, it's totally great. It's totally great.
I'm just joking.
No, man,
No,
I'm not like.
on the point of like sometimes it's better to share the room. It's like imagine what you can get as a one bed like for a one bedroom apartment, and then or like a one bedroom house or whatever, if you're sharing that with 4 or 5 people, you can get a much nicer house with some common areas that give you more room, maybe a
Totally.
bigger backyard. And now is the time to do it because it gets much, much harder to make these sacrifices when you're a bit older and you're starting to get ready for a family. So,
Yes. Yeah. When you're younger, the little stuff, doesn't seem to matter as much. As you age, you start realizing like, oh, that actually really annoys me. I'm not willing to put up with that. And so you put up these kind of walls and barriers, things can get more challenging. Um, Another one that I would say, especially for our young listeners, is like eating out.
yep.
So it can be so fun and it can be a great,
Yeah.
it can be an amazing thing to do, a great experience, but it can also be a big, big money suck. And I think it's important to understand where your money is going and really look in the mirror and determine, is it worth it? And for me, again, I was so fortunate because I was traveling so much, I was already eating out. And so when I was at home, I wanted to cook, to be at home. And so it made it so I got to have these experiences. Of course, my friends weren't traveling with me. I was usually traveling solo, but go out and meet people and chat with people at restaurants or at bars, wherever you happen to be. Um, and so it can be a way to scratch that itch, but also then help you save by being at home and eating out, or eating out a lot less. Um,
And it builds future skills. If you know how to cook, that's going to help you in the long run for sure.
Big time, big, big,
Yeah.
big time. Another one, especially for those just getting out of school or maybe just getting their first job or second job, is spending money on luxuries, like the nice watch, the fancy clothes, the nice shoes. Like,
Shoes. Yeah.
yeah, like again, if that's important to you, budget for it. And we'll probably get into budgeting here in a little bit. But as someone that is trying to get somewhere, ask yourself, is this getting me closer to my goal? Any dollar you're spending, ask yourself, is this getting you closer to your goal? And it's not always going to be yes, right? There are things that you can go buy and splurge and have fun and live life. It doesn't have to be a cut everything out of your life. But on those big purchases that are expensive, maybe ask yourself, is it worth it? And is there a less expensive alternative? The answer in my experience oftentimes was yes. So I would go shop at Macy's, I would go shop at Nordstrom Rack, I would go shop at Marshalls, TJ Maxx to get
Buffalo
those nice
Exchange,
clothes.
Crossroads, go to yeah, hit the
Yeah,
thrift shops. Yeah.
the thrift shops, man. Like there are so many great alternatives to the high-end brand names that look just as good, are just as comfortable, maybe last just as long, but are could or a tenth of the price. And so figure out what it is you actually need and what brings you joy and meaning in your life, and then go spend money on those things. And so if it's not the expensive things, well, that makes it easier. If it is the expensive things, be introspective and decide for yourself, is this worth it? And is this helping me achieve my goal?
Yep.
And
Time
then,
preference. If you can delay your gratification, the payoff is much
yes,
bigger.
yes, exactly, exactly. And then, kind of similar vein, new cars. A lot of people who are just getting first jobs are so excited. They have a ton of money and now they go buy a new car. And it's like the fastest way to lose money on something you buy is buying a new car. It depreciates really quickly. Now, there are instances where you can make the argument to buy a new car where it does make sense. I'm someone, I was never in a million years have ever thought I would buy a new car in my life. I'm here to tell you, I bought a new car back in 2020 during pandemic because the car that we wanted, there were no used models of. Everything that was used was like 5 to 10 years old. And the cost, it was like additional $3,000 to buy new versus like a 5-year old with 50,000 miles. We're like, you know what? It doesn't ordinarily make sense, but right now it does. So we did it. I probably won't do it ever again. The next car I bought was used, but there are instances where it makes sense. But so don't go buy the new fancy luxury car. And if you do, pay cash. Like we paid cash for the car. We had saved up. We didn't want a car payment. So I think just don't get caught up in that trap of, oh, you got to get a fancy car and then the fancy clothes for the fancy job. Like, no, there are other ways to do it.
On top of if you're getting a new car and you do have this car payment, on top of that, you're probably going to be required to get an elevated level of insurance coverage as well. So your car insurance
Yes.
payment is going to be way up there as well. So it adds up super fast. I have never bought a new car. I have no plan to buy a new car anytime soon.
Yep. Keep it that way, man. Keep it that way.
Okay. You mentioned budgeting. Can you talk to me just a little bit about, it seems like the most basic thing. Everyone should know how to create a budget, but can you talk to me about, creating a wise budget? Do you use any programs? What do you do?
The infamous B word, everybody's favorite word. So yeah, I mean, it's an ever evolving process, I think, me, and especially because I'm married and we're expanding our family. So our budget is kind of this living, breathing, evolving thing. But what I used to do is figure out what my savings rate or how much I wanted to save every single month or every single year. And because I'm an engineer, I love math. And so I kind of reverse engineered, okay, what am I able to spend based on how much I'm trying to save? And so savings is my North Star because that's my goal. That's what I'm trying to get to be able to do the thing. And for me, that was invest in real estate. So I said, okay, I need to be saving X dollars a month to be able to make one transaction per year based on an average transaction cost of X dollars. So, okay, we back into that. So that requires me to save Y dollars per month. Okay, I'm bringing in W amount of dollars every month. I'm trying to save Y every single month. So that delta is what I'm allowed to spend. And so then I go and figure out, okay, well, what am I going to spend that on? Well, I have a gym membership, so okay, that's $100 a month. And so then what are my fixed costs versus what are my variable costs? And the fixed costs are the things that occur every single month that you want to have as part of your life that you're not willing to change. Therefore, they're fixed versus what's a variable cost. So a fixed cost would be like a gym membership, car insurance, car payment. These are things that you have to pay if you want to have them in your life. Versus a variable cost is like eating out, entertainment, going to do activities, going to an amusement park or whatever. Doing activities that require money are typically going to be variable costs. And so you subtract out your from your income, you subtract out your savings rate. That should be the first thing to go to be accounted for. Then you subtract out your fixed costs. And then whatever is left over is your fund money or your variable cost money. And then you get to decide how to allocate that and what to go spend that on. And so I think so many people, myself included for a long time, would kind of flip that around and say, okay, well, I make this amount of money and I'm going to go spend it on this gym membership. And then I'm going to spend it on the car payment. And then I love to go eat out. So I'm just going to go do that. And then at the end of the month, I'm like, oh, well, I've got $30 left in my bank account. So I guess that's my savings. And it's a surefire way to not maximize your savings rate. And so there's a concept of paying yourself first. And so whenever you're getting income, pay yourself first. Pay yourself the savings, whatever you're trying to accomplish. And then whatever is left over is what you get to spend. And it's amazing how this mindset shift will change how you save and your ability to save. And it sounds silly, and it sounded silly when I first heard it, but the results speak for themselves.
I can't remember who I was listening to a podcast a while back, and they talk about like when we get stressed out in life, or, it's been a while since we've done something nice for ourselves. We go and spend some money to get a dopamine hit. You want like, oh, it's time I want to treat myself.
Yes.
Um, but it's to try to retrain your brain to get a dopamine hit when you save money for your future self. If you can
Yes.
say, you know what, I'm feeling a certain way, let me just, you know what, I'm going to put this towards my future, and try to train your brain to get that dopamine hit when you're doing something for your future self. And that can go a long way. And if you've
Absolutely.
never, yeah, and if you've never done a budget, if you never made a budget, I cannot impress upon you strong enough to do it. No, count every expense you've spent. Stop spending in the dark. Know what is going out every month and see what you can cut from that regular spend.
Yeah. Yeah. We used to do it. My wife and I used to do it in Excel. And she was like, made her want to bang her head against the wall. And she's like, this is not fun. This is not working. And we recently found this app called Monarch, which we have no
Hmm.
affiliation with, which we really like. It's like $100 a year, and you link it to your credit cards, your bank accounts, and it shows you all the comings and goings. And it was great. Like it's been really eye opening and really helpful for us as a couple. When you're a single person, it's still important to budget and determine and figure out where your money is going because there's a lot of leaks we often find. But as a
Hmm.
couple or as a family, it can be even greater, and it can be even more important, and it can be fun. Like this doesn't have to be a pain in the butt. This doesn't have to be sacrificial. This doesn't have to feel like we're less than. It can be a really positive and fun and engaging experience to do.
Totally. We still use a spreadsheet, but we go back through our accounts at the end of the month to make sure that none of the expenses that we made are missed. So,
Yeah. No, I think that's
um,
great. And I think
yeah,
like to that point, we would do the same thing with this with the Monarch app or however you budget. We found that like looking at it weekly, even just looking at it makes such a big impact because you'd be like,
totally.
holy crap, like I've already spent $500 on this. Maybe I need to do better for the next 3 weeks of this month, as opposed to
Yeah.
at the end of the month looking back in the rear view and going, oh, I wish I hadn't spent that much. Being a little more proactive allows you to make incremental changes in the moment, which we found to be super helpful.
All right, Mike, I want to move over to the topic of tax advantage accounts. How can you use your retirement account to help you in your journey to invest in real estate?
Yeah, it's a man. You're asking good questions today. So I am a big believer. I know I said before that like you shouldn't be putting money into the stock market that you're likely going to need for your upcoming investment. And upcoming is going to be defined by you, the listener, by every individual person. Is it 6 months? Is it 12 months? But something that I did is I was investing heavily into my 401k that I had through my employer. And there was also a match there. And so if your company has a match, that's like free money. You should definitely be getting the match at the very least. But I was investing heavily in my 401k because it was reducing my tax liability for the dollars that I was putting into that. And so a 401k, for anyone who isn't familiar, you don't pay tax on the dollars going in, you pay tax on the dollars when they come out. So the goal is if you earn $1,000 a month and you put $300 into your 401k, the government, when they're taxing you, says, okay, well, Pierre, you only made $700 because we're only taxing the part that didn't go into the 401k. So that's a tax advantage. And so now you're paying less taxes. The hope is that your 401k grows over time. And then when you, Pierre, are 65 or retirement age and decide to take that $300 out, hopefully that's grown over time. When you take that money out, it's taxed as income. So it's a tax advantage account. So what I was doing is I was putting as much money into this 401k as I could in hopes that it would grow over time, and it did. So I was reducing my tax liability on the front end, on the money that I was keeping, putting in my pocket. And I knew that I could actually use my 401k in the form of a 401k loan to then go invest in real estate. And so what I ended up doing is, and there's a limit to that. It's not an unlimited dollar amount, but I think it's $25,000 or 50% of your balance, whichever is less. I think I'm saying that right, whichever is less. And this was through Fidelity. This was like 10 years ago. So I was like $25,000 short for my down payment. Well, I had spent several years building up my 401k. I borrowed 25 grand from my 401k, used that as my down payment. And then every 2 weeks, because that was my pay period, I would get a deduction off my paycheck to pay back this 401k loan. And the 401k loan was at like 4.5 or 5% at the time. And so the cool thing is that that interest went to myself. So I borrowed 25 grand. At the end of the day, at the end of the 5 years, I ended up paying back like, I don't know, 28 grand, something like that. But so I put more money into my 401k than I ended up taking out. Now it wasn't a tax deduction on the money that I put back in, but it was a really great way to be able to grow money that I was able to use relatively quickly. And if it hadn't grown, I would have it's not a big deal because at the end of the day, because it's in a retirement vehicle, so I could just use it down the road. So again, it's important to think about the time horizon of when you need the money. If you are planning on using this in the next 6 months, 12 months, keeping it in cash often makes the most sense. If you're a 1 to 2 year time horizon out, sticking it in the stock market could make sense, but also sticking it into a retirement vehicle could also make sense. And you get the double benefit of getting the tax advantage on the dollars that you're keeping outside of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I hope it makes sense to everyone
I hope
else.
it makes sense if you're listening. If it doesn't make sense, let us know. Leave
Let
us
us
a
know. Yeah,
question or
please.
in the comments, and we'll clarify it for you. But so that was something that worked really well for me, and I found to be a very powerful vehicle.
Can you talk to me about the stock market? You mentioned that there. How can you use the stock market to grow your funds?
Yeah. So getting back to the prior example, if you decide that, hey, retirement vehicle either doesn't feel good or doesn't work because there's that $25,000 or 50% cap limitation, and I know I'm going to need, say, $50,000 to make this first investment. Putting money into the stock market can be a great way to grow it. And so again, I'm someone that thinks about time horizons really critically. And so if your goal is, if you're listening to this episode and saying, guys, I'm going to commit, I'm going to invest in my first property in the next 2 years. I'm trying to grow as fast as I can, my money as fast as I can. In the stock market can be a great way to go, with the full understanding and going into this eyes wide open that the value can decrease, right? And so if you can't live with that thought, if that scares you too much, then don't stick into the stock market, right? So you have to understand what your particular risk tolerance is based on the vehicle that you're thinking about using. And so investing in ETFs is often touted as a very safe investment vehicle within the stock market because you're diversifying your risk, you're spreading yourself out across multiple companies as opposed to putting $10,000 on Tesla stock, right? You're betting on red or black at that point. And so you just
Can you
want to
explain a little bit more what an ETF is, just for those who don't know?
Yeah, totally. So an ETF is an acronym. It stands for an exchange traded fund. And it's basically a bunch of companies, or it's a stock that is comprised of a bunch of different stocks. And so there's an ETF that comprises the entire Dow Jones index. There is an ETF that comprises all of the funds, all of the companies that trade on the S&P 500, on the NASDAQ. And so you're buying a stock that's comprised of all of these things. And so if Tesla goes out of business all of a sudden and you own Tesla stock, your stock value goes to zero. Conversely, if you own an ETF that owns shares of Tesla stock or is comprised of a portion of Tesla and Tesla goes out of business, you still have all these other companies. That Tesla stock might represent 1% of the total value of that particular ETF. So it's a way to diversify your risk. And so it lowers the beta, so to speak. And so it reduces the lows, but it also reduces the highs. So stocks can really yo-yo in terms of value. It smooths that out by spreading out the risk across multiple companies.
Very cool. I think we risk overloading if we continue down this road. So what do you say we wrap it up after this? Do you have any other closing words for young investors, aspiring investors, people just starting out?
Yeah, I think you don't remember the stuff that sucked when you're doing it. You don't remember the small sacrifices when you're doing it or making it, but you sure as hell know about the big rewards and the big benefits down the road. And so I can say, again, firsthand account, living with roommates as a married person, was it awesome? No, it was not our first choice, but it was something we did because we knew it was going to lead us somewhere else. And would we change it? Not for the world. We're so thankful we did it. And those aren't the things we remember, but yet we have this investment that's going to pay us for the rest of our lives. So think about that when you're on the cusp or on the fence about making a decision of, am I willing to sacrifice? Am I willing to make a sacrifice, be uncomfortable for this set amount of time to live comfortably the rest of my life?
Pay now, play later.
That's it, man. That's it.
Well, let's get out of here, Mike.
Sounds great, Pierre. This was a lot of fun, man.
Thanks everyone for listening. Please subscribe, leave us a comment. That helps us out a ton. And we'll catch you out on the next episode. Take care.
Happy investing.